My name is Osei-Frimpong, and I'm here at the Black Athenians at Broderick Flanagan Studio at Friday at 4 o'clock-ish to tell you the quality of political education that will, I hope, lead to a better world. First of all, the title of the show is Give Me Your Inheritance, because I think you should give me your inheritance, because either you give it to me now, or for a lot of you guys, you'll end up spending it on your kids' therapy bills or drug rehabs because you haven't allowed me to make the world a better place so that they'll end up self-medicating on drugs, or they'll hate you or their friends and they'll end up in, therapy for other reasons. So if you give me your inheritance now or put me in your will, that way, it'll allow me to make the cultural products that will create a better world. So it won't be. It'll help me create the cultural products to make it a better world, so that you won't have to spend that same money, helping out your progeny or your neighbors or your cousins or your nephews. Now, what does that mean? Why should I do this? Well, first of all, I'm losing Matthew. You need to give me your inheritance now because Matthew graduates and he's already got a job offer. So I need to outbid a very large employer in Georgia if we want to keep Matthew. But the vision's a little bit bigger than that. And I want you to first give me the Tuttle, the Tuttle twins. I realized that in order to do the quality of political education I need actual resources. I can't just do it month to month out of Flanagan Studio. I would need a bigger studio, and I think to create more cultural products. For example, there's a little libertarian think tank run out of Utah. They create kids' books that teach them to be little white supremacists. Not by name, it's kind of libertarians, but think about it. If America is set up, give me the wealth graph. If America is set up and organized this way, where black people are worth, like the red line, at $1,700 and going down, and white families are worth $116,000 and slightly going up, and you're just teaching kids that all of this is justified, you're functionally a white supremacist. So it's the Tuttle Twins is a little series of kids' books that teaches the quality of American education that will keep that wealth gap and distribution as it is and justify it. Right? I ran into the ad for the Tuttle Twins on my Facebook wall, and then I kind of clicked on the link, and I saw they have a series of kids' books all tailored towards creating little libertarians. There's nothing like this on the left. I think I could write and illustrate. Well, thing is, I could do all of that, but I don't want to. I actually want to pay other black people to do this work. So you give me your inheritance. I'll sit down with other black people, and we will write and illustrate a better quality of children's book than, say, the Tuttle Twins. And I'll talk more about these kinds of projects after the intro. Go ahead and hit the beat, Matthew.
To the beat, y'all. Yeah. Sound good to me. Never change the ways for the world or the government. If I was the president, then I would state facts. You leave it up to me, I paint the White House black and ain't no future in your front.
So you have to know that people say, well, I don't try to raise a white supremacist, or I don't try to raise, a black kid who gets kicked out of high school and college and gets kicked out of their job. But you have to understand that even if you don't have those kind of designs on your kid, America has those kinds of designs on your kid, right? So you need to actually change the water. And the only way you change the water is by changing the culture. And as Bobby Wright said, if you change their minds, you change their behinds. So I need to be in the changing minds business so that we can start changing some behinds. And because, the white supremacists are in the changing minds business. So it's not just about a YouTube show. It's about actually getting a better quality of history in our schools. And to do that, you need lobbyists, you need the historical products. The thing about, say, something like Focus on the Family, they have worksheets and workbooks and videos, and I think we need all of that on the other side. Like talking to tell the truth to black people about black people and to tell the truth to white people about white people, because that's actually where we lose the game. And people don't understand that, because when you go to like a racial justice symposium or anything, they'll be like, well, we'll just give black people a museum, or we'll have another black culture or black cultural moment or exhibition. But really, we lose the game because nobody tells white people about themselves. I think I'm up to that job. And I think that's where we lose history, and that's where we get the distorted view of reality. If you don't know anything about me, I'm a PhD student in philosophy at the University of Georgia. When I'm not here, I read Plato, Aristotle, Hegel, and Kant. Like I'm a philosopher. And I talk about black stuff when I'm here. Sometimes I talk about black stuff in the philosophy department, but mostly I talk about black stuff. Well, I talk about Hegel and Kant here, and I talk about black stuff there. So it's all kind of mixed in, but I have a unique skill set that I think the people need to know insofar as they care about freedom or justice or any of these other ideas. And if they don't get it from me, they're going to get it from, once again, the Tuttle Twins. Give me the Tuttle Twins. Those are the Tuttle Twins, right? And then, so I clicked on this link, and it said, we teach these values based on our libertarian ideology. So I went to look at who publishes the book, and give me the Libertas fan. There you go. It's these guys. These guys published them. So I'm like, Libertas Institute. All right. So dicey Latin, and I don't know. So let's. So what do they do? What do they do? Yeah. Let's see what the Libertas Institute does. The Libertas Institute is a libertarian think tank located in Lehigh, Utah. The organization's stated mission is to advance the cause of liberty within the state of Utah. The Institute focuses on free market policies, private property rights, and civil liberties issues, including police reform. But when they talk about police reform, they're not talking about what I'm talking about with police reform. When they talk about police reform, they're talking about like some, those white militia occupations that happen every now and then.
They want to make the police more violent.
Yeah. It's my granddaddy was on this land, and no government's going to tell me what to do with this land. There are like rifles and militias and jeeps involved. That's the kind of police reform they want. That's not the kind of police reform I want. So also, they talk about property rights. I would like to talk about all the rights, not just property rights, especially being a person who used to be considered property. And so I would just like to tell you also the limits of the free markets. Free markets are great. They allow this microphone to be designed, right? But the free market's not going to integrate your school. The free market's not going to integrate your neighborhood. The free market's not going to lower incarceration. In fact, free market might raise incarceration. Free market's definitely not going to secure employee-employer fair relations. I just read a piece. There's a wonderful book out there called Private Government by Elizabeth Anderson. I just read a piece, and she mentions an Amazon warehouse where they decided that instead of getting an HVAC system for heating and cooling and air condition, they would just park ambulances outside so that when people faint, they can just rush them off to the hospital. You got to understand that a free market guru came up with that cost-benefit analysis, and that's the way it happened. But you also have to understand that you can say, well, the Amazon employee could have just quit their job and then worked for another factory with those same conditions. So that's not the problem. The problem is that worker doesn't have say in their working conditions and isn't organized within a union to like bargain, because you can't do this one-on-one. If you try to do this one-on-one, you'll end up fired or in a ditch somewhere. But you do it in a union, and you could actually organize your working conditions to say like, no, we're going to need air condition as opposed to the ambulance, right? Or you can, within the union, you can organize a public campaign to draw attention to the fact that you have an ambulance instead of air condition. So these are the kinds of things, these are the kinds of lessons I can teach through cartoons or children's books. Or I would also like well put together videos. Because right now, like I said, I had to kind of learn how to do all of this. And I think other people should learn how to do all of this. And like, if you give me your inheritance, and when I say your inheritance, I mean like in the hundreds of thousands or millions, because I know that's the kind of money we're talking about. Give me the one out of So 1 out of 7, I don't think it's all there, but 1 out of every 7 white families are now millionaires. For black families, it's 1 out of 50. There are a few things that are going on with that headline. One, you have to understand that the 1 out of 7 are millionaires because the 1 out of 50 black families are not, right? There's a relationship between those two numbers. Black poverty is very lucrative. Black vulnerability is very lucrative in non-obvious ways. I mean, think about it. If you own a white flight school that charges $20,000 in tuition, and can only charge that much in tuition because the people at the school don't want to go to school with black kids because his legacy of historical trauma, then that's a way of profiting off of that demographic, right? So, or that distribution of wealth. So 1 out of every 7 white families, and I will tell you, having known a lot of white parents, they're not particularly good with their kids. So a lot of that $1 million is going to end up in therapy. It's going to end up in drug rehab. It's going to end up in like giving your wastrel kid like some opportunity to start a business that's never going to work out, but just end up feeding their drug habits. So what I can do instead, if you give that money to me instead of your kid, once again, I'll create the quality of cultural products that will actually make not only your kid, but your kid's friends and the greater community a better place to live. And they'll have a better sense of self-determination and dignity and what all that means and how all of that's externalized in ways that don't just end up in drugs. Right? So you give the money to me, and then I'll create the quality of books and multimedia and the quality of friends that will then be good influences on your kid. Or you just, hold it off, and then your kid or grandkid becomes like the degenerate we think that he or she might be on the path to, and then you end up spending that money in an individual solution. And by the way, also, you should give me that money if your kid's doing fine, because if your kid's doing fine, that means it's easier to do fine in a world where other people get my quality of knowledge, right? So I will make your kids better, your kids' friends better, so that your fine kid will now have fine kid friends, and then everyone wins, right? So whether your kid's doing poorly or whether your kid's doing very well, it just behooves you to give that money to me instead of your kid. For the people, all right. So the money's out there. I want to create cultural products. I actually want to create not just cultural products. I want an institute where I train other people, both in what Matthew's doing in production, but also all aspects of it. And I want a little bit of a classier setup. I want many computer stations, and then I'd like a daily show run by somebody else who's not me that does the news, but from a black perspective or something like that. I'd like well-produced videos on black and white history, and I'd like a call-in show. Like I said, I could train other people with both my quality of intellect and the mechanics to do this. And I'd like a program where we cycle in kids every summer, and I teach them Photoshop, and I teach them, everything I've taught Matthew and how to set this up and the hardware and the software. And I wouldn't mind better hardware and software and better lighting, but in a stable way. So I'd like to buy a building, but since I'm in Athens, Georgia, it's not terribly expensive. So I can do all of this with a few $100,000 and just get it all paid outright. And I know you have that few $100,000 because we're talking about your inheritance and paying it to me now before you die, because some older people are watching this. They're like, what am I going to do with my legacy? Your legacy should be a better America through me. I could be the new science guy. Give me a picture of Bill Nye. Everyone likes Bill Nye, the science guy. I never watched Bill Nye, the science guy. Other people like Bill Nye, the science guy. But I think we need a black Bill Nye for political philosophy and freedom, right? Because right now, a lot of people are confused about the fight and the struggle. And it's the confusion that allows oligarchs just to buy people. Because if you're confused, that means you end up just moving by appetite as opposed to reason, and then I can buy your appetites. So you need me clarifying the fight intellectually, the way Bill Nye apparently clarified the world scientifically, and for the kids, so that they won't be so confused. And people who are less confused need less mental health help, because I'm helping their mind. All right, so I could be the Bill guy or the other guy. What's Mr. Rogers? This is one guy. Again, I didn't watch a lot of Mr. Rogers, but you need a black Mr. Rogers. Like I said, it doesn't have to be me. I would just like to kind of organize it to make sure it's done well. To teach the people how to be well, how to be good to each other, what it really means to love your neighbor and to be a neighbor. Right? And how to enable each other in their freedom. Because if you watch any of my other videos, that's pretty much, this all comes down to how the political antecedents to individual freedom. That's just what I give everyone every week for the last 2 years. I try to talk about the political antecedents and causes of individual freedom and how we've confused ourselves about what's oppressing us and the struggle and the current play of tyranny in our lives and what freedom looks like and how do we change our institutions to change our institutions of oppression into institutions of freedom. Right? So right now, if you're working at a warehouse and your boss has decided that the warehouse doesn't need to be air conditioned, instead they'll just station an ambulance outside, you're in an institution of oppression. And if that's a series of workspaces you have available to you, that's an oppressive system, because you're just hopping from one oppressive work condition to another oppressive work condition. You need me to help you figure out how to organize and secure a fair share. In this case, that means that means heating and cooling. And not set at 85. I'm shooting for your heating cooling to be set at 72. Now that's a lot of people consider, a lot of black people I know would consider that luxurious, but that's what I want. You're not free at 85 still on the job. You're free at 72. And once you get at 72, we can talk about 68, because you're working. and if you walk into a warehouse at 68 degrees, even though you're working, that's a different quality of life. And then that's fair, right? And then we can talk about what that means. Right? So you should give me your inheritance so that I can actually, there's property around here. I would just like to teach a room full of black kids how to do all aspects of production of this caliber, and better, actually, because like I said, we'd have better lighting and I'd have a few more cameras and computers and a series of computers, but also teach them the arguments, because like I said, I happen to know a lot of Plato, Aristotle, Hegel, Kant, the founding fathers. I have it all sitting in here, and I try to give it to you in bits and pieces through jokes every week. But if I could have curriculums and worksheets and books and a publishing arm, as well as an audio video arm, I think this would be better. And this would come with $1 million inheritance. So it'd be good for the world. It'd be good for the world that your kids are going to live in. And if you don't give it to me, notice that somebody gave it to the person who founded the Tuttle Twins. Right? This is what your kids' friends are reading. Maybe not your kid, but your kid's friends are reading. And if your kid's friends are reading it, that's not good for your kid. You need counter information to negate and overwhelm what they're getting, because what they're getting is the legitimation of white supremacy. And I could give that counter information. I can organize, and not just me, because it doesn't win. The only way this wins is through a democratic movement. First of all, so if your kid watches Disney movies, at the end of a Disney movie, the good queen or the bad queen or bad king gets overtaken by a good king or good queen. If I do the video production, if I do the story, the king or queen is overtaken by a majoritarian democracy, a republic actually, with rights that even the will of the majority can't overwhelm. Do you see the difference? Your kid's not going to grow up to want to be a princess. Your kid's going to grow up to want to be a labor organizer. That's a better world for both your kid and your kid's friends. And I can make that world happen in a entertaining way with lots of money. Lots of money. And some of you guys have an extra bit of lots of money. And so instead of that next cruise, just give it to me. Give it to me and allow me to build the quality of cultural institution that will secure freedom through education and clarifying the fight. Are there any other pictures I have here? Right, because someone gave it to the Libertas Institute. And that someone is not one of those people who's your friends. There's a great book called Democracy and Change written by Nancy McLean. I want to say it came out 3 years ago. It was about this guy. It was centered around this guy, Buchanan, who founded a lot of anti-government think tanks about 50 years ago. And they just worked the arguments over 40 years. And the whole goal of that was to stigmatize government. And that's why now people think that government's always bad. And that government doesn't secure rights, but like markets do. And markets do secure some rights, but they're not going to secure your clean environment. They're not going to secure your employment rights. You need government to do its job so that the market can do its job and secure me a better microphone, right? So we need to educate people in the institutions of freedom that are required for them to externalize themselves in a way that self-determines who they are, as opposed to being determined by external forces like the powers that decide you need to work in 102 degree heat. And that just the fact that you chose that job means that you're free. That doesn't mean you're free. That means that you're coerced by your circumstances to go from one crappy job to another crappy job. That's not freedom. Freedom is having some sort of say in your working conditions. Some sort of a fair say in your working conditions. And good. So yeah, we start, you give me your inheritance. I start a media factory that changes behinds by changing their minds. And then we all reap the benefits of living in a better, less confused world. Where people right now, both in the suburbs and in the hood, are depressed because they're chasing the wrong things. I can clarify the things you should chase in a way that allows people to enable other people's freedom. Right? So you no longer have to flee to the suburbs or stay miserable in the hood. We now know how to be with each other. And those are the quality of cultural products I'd like to produce. Because if I don't produce them, you have to understand that we live in a predatory market. The Tuttle twins will. And that just popped up on my Facebook as a sponsored ad. That's the fight. They're going to change minds. They're the ones who write school textbooks. They're the ones who shape the debate in a way that you don't even know that they're there. So I want to create cultural products for adults, cultural products for kids, and do so in a way that's philosophically rich, because that just happens to be what I know. And I think it'll lead people to both a healthier life and more clarity in their relationships. It'll make better citizens, better soldiers, better civilians, better parents, better students, and all that takes is your inheritance to make the world a better place. Matthew, what's on your mind?
I know there's probably some liberal out there who's thinking like, okay, we shouldn't teach children any type of politics because they're just children, right? They don't know anything better. But I would say to that argument that without any political knowledge or any political expertise at all, you end up leading a kind of boring and sort of miserable life that's completely just led by whatever desires you have out there. Yeah. Without understanding of like the whole part of society as a whole, you're just kind of floating.
You're floating and following a script that you don't actually know is not your script. I teach at UGA right now. A lot of my students, at least they would be if they didn't take my class, a lot of my students would be heading towards lives of misery by achieving everything they ever wanted, because everything they ever wanted has kind of been programmed and inputted into them by alien forces. So they'll end up with the house they want, the spouse they want, the job they want, making the money they want, and will be horribly depressed and have no idea why. With my class, they actually learn why. So that's what I get. I can't take away all the depression because some of it's already baked, but I can take away a lot of the confusion. So let me do that for your kids and do that for America's kids. But for that, and I think that would be a fine legacy for your wealth. And it would be a great legacy for black people because everything I do is going to end up in black freedom. And that doesn't mean necessarily black supremacy. It just means black freedom. That means freedom with other people. I just want to empower all the people. So, and in a way that they can work together. But that's going to take a quality of knowledge and a quality of insight that, honestly, a few hundred people have. I can read Greek, German, Latin, and study philosophy, and all I've done is study the institutions of freedom and how this works at kind of a deeper level than most people. So, I can tell you that real financial literacy. People say the problem with the black community is financial literacy. No, we save fine. The financial literacy that we need isn't how to balance our checkbook. The financial literacy that we need is how to organize a union. Because when you're making $9 and $10 an hour, your problem isn't financial literacy insofar as savings. We actually save at that level better than our white counterparts. Like I said, I've read all the data. The financial literacy you need is to organize to turn that $10 job into a $21 an hour job. And not just for you, but for everyone who's making $10 an hour. Because nobody's free at $10 an hour. Nobody in these United States. Nope. You're dependent on somebody. If you're a kid who's making $10 an hour, you're still not free. You're dependent on your parents. If you're an adult who's making $10 an hour, you're still not free because you can't even go outside. You can't get a bad diagnosis at $10 an hour. Your car can't break down because what happens when you get a bad taillight? You can't fix it at $10 an hour. And then what's going to happen? You're going to get pulled over for a bad taillight. And then once that happens, anything could happen. So I will teach a quality of freedom that I think will enable a better world, and by clarifying the struggle in a philosophically rich way, so people will be less confused about why they're depressed. Wealthy people and poor people and all of their friends. So that could be your contribution, and let that be your legacy helping America. Right? And, by the way, if you want to give monthly, $5, $15, or $50 a month, you can go to www.thefunkyacademic.com or funkyacademic.com, and you just click on the little thing, and it'll sign you up for $5, $15, or $50 a month. If you want to give me an enormous donation, you can do the one time only. That would be great too. If you want me to put me in a will, just go to Irami. That's my name, IRAMI, Irami, at funkyacademic.com. And just put that in the title of the email. I want to write you in my will, and I will respond. So it's Irami, IRAMI, at funkyacademic.com. And thank you for your time. Thank you for your generosity. I've been doing this show for a few years, and I hope it's been good for at least some people. And with that, I will see you next week.